Hey, welcome to Big Picture Monday. My name is Cali Black, here with all the context you need to totally rock this week's Come Follow Me readings. This week we are studying the book of Mosiah, chapters 1 through 3. I am so excited to start the book of Mosiah. This is a huge transition. So many transitions are happening at the beginning of this week's readings. When we start reading Mosiah, there's a lot of different things that are changing compared to what we've been reading the past few months. Now, I want to say, if you missed my Big Picture Monday from last week, where I went through the small books and I went through as much as I could pack in those 15 minutes, go watch it, because not only will it be good for you to understand what happened last week, but it sets the stage for so many weeks to come. Like specifically the next 4 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks are going to be completely related to what I talked about last week, and there's too much for me to repeat it each time. So please go back and watch that. Make sure you're familiar with that. Or if you have my Big Picture Little Picture study guide, then you'll have all the information for you week by week. But we are going to start the book of Mosiah by talking about King Benjamin. Now, who was King Benjamin? I'm sure it's a name you're very familiar with, King Benjamin. You may hear King Benjamin and think of him giving a speech. And that's pretty much all that we have about King Benjamin, which is kind of strange. But he gave an amazing speech, so we learn plenty from him. Now, who was King Benjamin? Remember, last week we talked about how there was this man named Mosiah who was asked by the Lord to leave the land of Nephi. That's where the Nephites had been for centuries at this point. But Mosiah was asked to take the righteous people because they weren't being righteous anymore. And the Lamanites seemed to have been in the land too. It was no longer the land of the righteous Nephites. It was just all over the place. And so Mosiah was asked to bring a group of people, righteous people, and go somewhere new. And that's when they found the land of Zarahemla. They found the Mulekites that were already there. And then everyone all together in Zarahemla was like, Mosiah, how about you be our king? And Mosiah was like, okay, I'll be the king. So Mosiah's the king. And we don't hear much about his reign, other than we know he has a son named Benjamin, who eventually became the king. Now, at the end of the book of Omni, we talked about how there was that guy named Amaleki who wrote the most at the end of the book of Omni. And he said in his writings there at the end that he was running out of room on the small plates, and that he was going to, and he also didn't have sons. He didn't have any sons to pass them on to, and the plates had been passed father to son, brother, father to son for so long. He didn't know what to do with the plates, so he decided to give them to the king, who was King Benjamin. So King Benjamin now has the plates. He has all the plates. They're his, and he is in charge. And also in the Words of Mormon, in Words of Mormon last week, at the very end, Mormon started kind of giving like a preview for Mosiah, where we did learn a little bit about King Benjamin's reign. We know that there was a huge battle where the Lamanites came to battle the Nephites, and King Benjamin led them to victory. But that's about it, like historically, because now we're going to pick up at the very end of King Benjamin's life. King Benjamin knows that his life is about to end, and he knows that he needs to get ready to pass the kingdom on to someone else. And that's what we're going to read about this week. Now, I mentioned that there are some transitions going on. There are 4 big transitions that happen when we start the book of Mosiah. Okay, the first transition is we transition from having direct descendants pass the plates on to like father to son to brother to father to son, just kind of based off of who they are. We transition then to now the kings being in charge of the plates. So it goes to King Benjamin, and yes, King Mosiah is the next person to have it, and he is also his son as well, but it's going with the kings. Whereas prior to this, other than Nephi, none of those other people in between were rulers of the land. So we're going now to the kings. The second transition is we're transitioning from the land of Nephi being like the hub for the Nephites, which you would think logically makes sense, right? Land of Nephi, Nephites. In fact, that's what Nephi first established, right? He left the land of first inheritance to go establish the land of Nephi with all the righteous people that would stay with him. But now the land of Nephi is going to be the hub for the Lamanites. And the land of Zarahemla is going to be the main hub for the Nephites. So we've swapped in these few hundred years here, we've swapped land of Nephi, now think Lamanites, and land of Zarahemla, that's the hub for the Nephites. Okay, third transition. We are leaving the small plates and we are now starting the large plates. Or to be clear, we are starting Mormon's abridgment of the large plates. With me on that? So remember, back at the beginning, we learned that Nephi was asked to write to make two different plates. Large plates that would be more historical, small plates that would be more spiritual. Okay, small plates, that's what we've been reading from so far. And we've been reading from those small plates, right? We read what Nephi wrote. I, Nephi. We read what Jacob wrote. I, Jacob. I don't think he ever says that. But people writing in first person, right? They're writing their own stories. And now we're transitioning to the large plates. Because we learned from Malachi at the end of Omni, the small plates were basically full, according to what he said. And so now spiritual and historical stuff is all going to be in the large plates. As you can imagine, that is a ton of information. And so a few hundred years in the future, Mormon is looking at these large plates and he is inspired by the Lord to think, you know what? I can't just attach all of these large plates. There's so much, and not all of this is really relevant for this future people that I picture that are going to be getting these plates. And so what he does is he takes the large plates and he's summarizing them in a more succinct way. Or maybe he's pulling out really important parts and he is quoting that part. Or maybe he sees a whole bunch of pages for a few years and he's like, that was not really relevant to anything. So he just says, and peace passed by for the span of 5 years or whatever. He is deciding with the influence of the Spirit what out of that large plates we actually need to know. Okay, that is a huge transition. So as we started the book of Mosiah, we are now reading Mormon's abridgment of the large plates. Okay, and that's going to continue basically until the end, until we catch up with when Mormon actually lived. That's when it will continue. And the fourth transition kind of goes along with that. I was mentioning it a little bit, is that we're transitioning from, this is the English teacher in me, but I always find this interesting. We're transitioning from first person writing perspective, where the people are saying, we did this, and they're sharing their own thoughts and their own words, right? We're transitioning now to Mormon summarizing what's going on. So it's going to transition to third person perspective, where he's going to say, Alma did this, and Mosiah did this, and Zenith did that. He's narrating what's happening. Now, the only caveat to that is that sometimes Mormon did copy things straight from the plates, and those were mostly speeches. AKA, when we read King Benjamin's speech this week and next week, we will have some first person, because Mormon was clearly quoting what King Benjamin actually had. Okay, so it's not that it's only third person. There will be some first person stuff, but if it is first person, you know that Mormon is quoting someone. And then I think the other fascinating thing to look out for, and I'll point it out in future weeks as we see more examples, but Mormon is a real person with his own thoughts and feelings. And as with any author, they're going to insert their own opinions and views and thoughts into what's going on. And so Mormon will add little commentary, right? That famous phrase, and thus we see, that's Mormon coming up with a lesson from what he's writing. So it's just interesting to look for some of the commentary, and remember that this is Mormon. This is Mormon writing what he saw happening as he read the plates. Okay, big transition, right? Here we go. Let's dive into now the book of Mosiah. Luckily, the context specifically for these 3 chapters is pretty straightforward. Chapter 1, King Benjamin, remember this is Mosiah's son. Mosiah has already passed away. King Benjamin already had a big battle and he's at the end of his life. He realizes he's about to die. And King Benjamin gathers his 3 sons together and he's going to give them some counsel. We see that pattern a lot in the scriptures. And then he's going to tell his son Mosiah. So this is a different Mosiah than Grandpa Mosiah. We're not really going to talk about Grandpa Mosiah anymore. Now it's all about King Benjamin's son, Mosiah. And he's going to say Mosiah is going to be the next king, and he passes on a whole bunch of relics to Mosiah. He gives him the large plates, of course. He gives him the brass plates that Nephi originally took out of Jerusalem. He gives him the sword of Laban and the Liahona. So all of these relics are also being transferred down. It's the first, we haven't known exactly what's been going on and where they've been, but we get a little record right here that they were passed on to Mosiah. And then King Benjamin says, I really want to talk to everyone in the land before I die. And so Mosiah goes out and starts to gather everyone to Zarahemla, where they have built a temple. And that takes us down to chapters 2 and 3, which are both part of King Benjamin's speech. And this does continue next week, so it's not just this week. We get to hear more from Benjamin next week. But beginning in chapter 2, we learn that everyone gathers in Zarahemla by the temple, and they're in tents, and they make sure their door is open to the temple, and they build a tower so that Benjamin's words can get as far as they can, but then he also makes sure that there's scribes writing it down so they can pass it out, and he starts to preach. He teaches so much about service. He talks about how he has been in the service of his people, and that when we serve others, we are in the service of our God. He also tells us that we will always be unprofitable servants. And he tells everyone that if you rebel, you will lose the Spirit. And if you keep the commandments, you will be blessed. You will have the Spirit with you. He continues on with chapter 3 when he shares now a vision that an angel gave to him. He had an angel come to him and share a vision, and the angel taught him. And Benjamin is now going to share the words just in chapter 3 here that the angel taught him. And it's all about Jesus. All about Jesus's life and his mission. Some prophecies here. So you're going to read about Jesus a lot. The angel is going to teach, and then Benjamin's going to teach that to his people, that children are born innocent and that the natural man is an enemy to God. And that's it. There's lots of other great stuff, but you can read it. You can enjoy all the teachings. That's pretty straightforward. And that's where we end up. Like I said, next week we'll pick up with the end of King Benjamin's speech, and then we'll move on to focus more on Mosiah, this son, this new king that's going to begin. And this Mosiah is a big character. Just to look a little bit in the future, he will eventually have some sons, the sons of Mosiah, who will team up with Alma the Younger. Sounding familiar? So much goodness from Mosiah and his posterity coming as well. Okay, that's it. Your turn to study. Go read that goodness. Soak up all of the amazing teachings from King Benjamin. I mean, these scriptures are quoted all the time this week and next week. So much goodness. I think my personal focus question, it has to be about service, because he talks so much about that, and thinking, why are we asked to serve? Really, what are some reasons why God has asked us to serve? And then I just want to reflect, when are times where I've served someone else and it has blessed my life? Maybe in a roundabout way or maybe in a direct way, but a time where I've served and I have felt blessed. I find that, and maybe it's a little selfish, but I find that when I reflect on that and I allow the Spirit to bring those blessings to my mind, I feel like I'm a little more motivated to then go out and serve and be like, oh yes, God does notice. He does notice when I'm serving other people. I was blessed with that peace. I was blessed with that love. I was blessed with whatever that was. I feel like it's allowing the Spirit to show me where the Lord is abundantly blessing me for any efforts that I put out to help any one of his other children. Okay, have a great week this week. Happy studying.